Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Leaders in Value Chain podcast. I'm your host, Radu Palamariu, and delighted to have with us today Donna Warton, who is the Corporate Vice President of Microsoft. She is running all the supply chain and sustainability for the Microsoft Windows and devices. She's had an illustrious career in supply chain. Well, actually, she started in finance. She spent about 10 years in finance, then proceeded to spend a large chunk of her career in Motorola, then Dell, and now 10 years, isn't it? 10 years, Donna, in Microsoft. Welcome and a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Radu. Thanks for asking me to participate in your podcast. Happy to be here.
So first and foremost, maybe let's start a little bit your career and perhaps some inflection points. Yeah, some moments where you look back and like, wow, that made a lot of difference, and why did it make so much difference for you and where you are today?
Yeah, it's such a good question because, boy, I tell you, being at this point in my career, it goes by fast. So when I think back about those early days in finance, in corporate finance, I'll start there. I was changing jobs every 2 years. I was for a couple years I'd be supporting a sales organization, then I would be supporting a manufacturing team, a materials team, an engineering or a product team. I supported mergers and acquisitions for a while. I supported a startup. I shut down a factory and shut down a business. And all of those experiences, I created a reputation, I guess, for collaboration, for leaning into hard problems, not shying away from tackling hard problems and bringing solutions to the table. And because of that, I was tapped to take on a role in operations. And that was, a pretty big move because when you invest a lot of time within a certain company, within a certain function, and hopefully people can resonate with this, it does feel risky at the time. But I did lean into people who knew me well and asked for their opinion, and they were like, without a doubt, this would be a great move for you. You're just a system thinker, you're a process thinker. You would be great in operations. And that's exactly what it turned out to be. I mean, I really found that operations and more specifically supply chain was really a great fit for me because of the skill set that I had, and I love solving problems. I mean, supply chain is all about solving problems, and then doing it in a way where you are orchestrating, in many cases, across functions, across systems, across tools, and bringing people together. And so that felt like a good place for me, and yeah, I've never looked back. So that was a
Love
big moment for me.
and love the fact that you said, yeah, they said that, one of the hardest things to do, go into supply chain and operation. So
Exactly.
it's probably
Well,
something.
and I think about back when I was at Motorola. It's when we were globalizing supply chain. And so I spent a lot of time in Asia. Like, just to give you an example, like, Singapore, of
Yeah.
course, 20 years ago was very different from the first class world city it is today. Beijing, for example, there were more people than bikes, more bikes than buses, and hardly any cars on the road. And so, my time in China, just seeing that country develop and grow and, work with so many people across the globe, from China and Singapore and Japan and India and Malaysia. It was really an incredible experience. It was a very human experience in building global supply chains because it was through people that built these supply chains. And so I think that was another big moment in my career that really shaped me. It made the world a lot smaller for me.
Mm. And I want to share a recent experience. I was talking to a mathematician. So he's now a global head of supply chain for a chemicals company. And we were talking on, you don't need to have a specific industry experience to lead or supply chains. You don't have to be a specialist in the function necessarily. You know, you came from finance. He was coming from mathematics. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, look, supply chains are complex, but they don't need to be complicated. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're able to fix and to understand and to address complex systems, you can run a supply chain, not oversimplifying things. But I think there is a need overall in the function for some leaders, not yourself, obviously, you come from a different background altogether, but for some leaders to also be open to get inputs and almost talent from almost consciously, at least parts of it, right? Maybe 10% of the supply chain team from other functions, because that brings a wealth of openness and of perspective
Yeah.
that maybe otherwise is lacking.
Well, I mean, I feel like the career that I had, we had to figure out everything. I mean, there was no playbooks for scaling Razor, for example, from 300,000 units a year to 100 million units a year. Nobody had ever done that before. So there was this sense of nobody's done it. We're going to do it, and we have to go figure out how to do it. So there was kind of this shared energy of, how we create something and how we make it lasting. And I think that's also stayed with me. This, maybe it's a lack of fear of failing, or maybe it's embracing failure, because we did fail a lot. But part of that is what I love about hardware tech and about product making. You don't get every product right. Either you miss something about the market, or you didn't have the right price point, or you didn't have the cool factor that people were looking for, or you didn't solve a simple problem and your competitors did. And so there's so much innovation, and what I've seen, and certainly I've seen this at Microsoft the most in my career, is how people come together around that process. And I had a prior boss who said, products are a reflection of the people that make them. And it couldn't be more true. And I think the more people you have involved in that product making process, you have a better product. So I love being a part of the product making process. I think that's been just an exciting part of hardware tech, and producing, the products through the supply chain.
Yes. Now moving to the core supply chain topic, and obviously global leader in Microsoft, you're producing some of the best tech out there, some of the best devices out there. First, I want to start, and given that you have told me offline that is just being launched today as we speak, yes. So I wanted to just allow you a short commercial on what's the new exciting product that's coming out of Microsoft on the devices side.
So we have within Microsoft, we have new consumer devices that were announced today, that will be available in market in middle of June. And they'll be running on a new Qualcomm chipset. They'll have an NPU part of it, part of our chipset. And we're enabling a new era of PCs that includes AI. And so AI will be part of the way we compute and the way that we use our computers to be more productive, whether you're a consumer or a commercial customer. We also shared across the ecosystem. Our ecosystem partners will also be launching new AI PCs as well. And so it's a really exciting time for compute, because we take computers for granted. We've been using them for quite some time. And this is a real step function change on how we are going to start envisioning AI being part of our daily lives, being our assistant. At Microsoft, we have branded our AI engine Copilot. And so we think about Copilot as being your assistant, whether you're figuring out your work week, whether you're planning a trip, whether you're planning what meals you're going to make, and what grocery list that entails. Like, AI can help you with all of that and then some. And I think it's really fascinating to be part of the team that brings these products to life. But we're just getting started. Of course, Copilot, we've only launched that 5 months ago. So it's still very early in the AI era and exciting to see where it goes.
Well, you definitely don't lose much time at Microsoft, and I mean, you're definitely leading this AI revolution, and it's exciting to see, and also to notice all the new possibilities that it brings. And with that, I want to tackle one that we all collectively need to work on, which is sustainability, and maybe one
Mm.
level further, it's circularity. And I know that in the new report that Microsoft put out, you have a whole segment on what you're doing on the devices side. So perhaps I'd like to invite you to share some of the highlights for you in terms of the progress where you're going, and specifically on the circular side, I'd love to pick your brains on some of the initiatives and the progress that Microsoft is making.
Yeah. So first, I will say that I'd really encourage people to read our sustainability report. And you can kind of skim through the major sections because it's pretty extensive. But part of it is, I'll say that our carbon emissions grew this past year. So this is our fiscal year 23. So we're kind of coming up on almost the very next year that we'll report on. From where I sit, it's a little bit dated, but I think what's important to note is that we grew a lot as a business because we were building out our data centers to support our AI strategy, and that will continue. And so now what we're doing is, because sales growth and sustainability investments aren't linear, right? It will show up, but we're still committed to our goals. And I think it's just really important to know that those two things are still happening. They don't always show up at the same time in our carbon reporting. But what's really important is that we're doing the work. We're making our products more repairable. We're leaning into circularity. We're using more recycled parts. We're reusing parts in the back end of the supply chain, and standing up a circular supply chain around that. I'm a big believer in, if you want your business to be around 30 years from now, you need to do the work now to create a circular supply chain. And that means that you may have to work with new suppliers. It means you may have to stand up new capabilities, but it's a very long-term horizon viewpoint, because you may not have the capability, or you'll be priced out to get the materials that you need. And so doing this work now is really a business imperative for the future, I think, of all companies, but certainly tech in particular. And ultimately, carbon is fine. It just, we have to take it out of the air. Carbon is not meant to be in the atmosphere. And so as we do the work to move to renewable energy, to move our suppliers to decarbonize. And then also we're, very big contractor of carbon capture. And that's really important, because we won't, be able to get there fast enough. So we have to have this capability of taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Mm. And I think with all those efforts, we still feel good about the commitments we made in 2030. But listen, I think supply chain folks are used to tackling hard problems. I mean, this is what we do. And these are hard problems, especially if your company is growing. They're really hard problems, because not only do you have to take the intensity out, the carbon emission product intensity down, but you have to offset the sales growth. And so unless you get to zero on carbon emissions at the product level, whatever sales you have, you're going to grow your emissions. And so it's really important that you're thinking of the big picture, and you're looking at how to create that circular supply chain. And that's the work that we're doing at Microsoft. I mean, it's probably the most important work that me and my team and the collective team in Windows and Devices is doing, to make sure that our business and our products are sustainable long term.
And I'll just read one that I particularly like, which was around investing in repairability across all the Surface portfolio. the fact that you're growing your authorized service provider network by more than 50% and increasing availability of spare parts, basically making it easier for things to get
Yes.
repaired and reused, which is, I think, is something that we all should, and all electronics companies at large should be investing on. I also saw that you are developing stronger and stronger relationships with your partners and with your suppliers. I think that's the crux of it. That's key. That's something that most companies are struggling with. How do you, because ultimately you have control over certain things within Microsoft and you don't have control over a lot of things which are in scope 3. Can you share with us some thoughts of, or maybe some wins where working closely with suppliers, how did that come about? Any sort of tips and tricks that maybe our audience can take home and learn from you?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, you have to have the conversation with suppliers and set the expectations. We have put in our supplier code of conduct that our suppliers have to share with us what their plans are to reduce carbon emissions across their supply chain by over 50% by 2030. And what we found is that most suppliers are doing this work, and we weren't even taking credit for the work that they had already done. Part of it was because maybe we weren't recognizing based on methodologies, et cetera. So there's some real important conversations to have around data and methodology to make sure that you're standardizing across your business so that you can collect data in a way that is meaningful for reporting for your suppliers as well as for your own business. And we've invested in a data platform. We use the LCA methodology, life cycle assessment, and we have over 70% of our bill of material on our Surface device product is traceable to a supplier and a part. So we know exactly what that carbon emissions is. And that's been hugely important because when we make a product change, when we talk to our suppliers about this is where we need to go, we can have those conversations, and when we make those changes we see them
Yeah.
in our actual carbon emissions, and so people get really inspired because the work that you're doing is visible in our eco profiles in our products. And so we're really using the carrot. We're like, come with us on this journey. Let's understand what your obstacles are. And there are real obstacles, Radu. I mean, not all countries have access to green energy. We're still working through that. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important that we recognize that this is a pretty significant change and we all have to lean in. And in some cases, it's important where you leverage your ecosystem. We all are running supply chains, but we all are part of an ecosystem, a broader ecosystem. And most likely you're sharing those same problems across the ecosystem. And so it's also recognizing where you want to lean in and tackle a problem on your own and where you want to partner with your ecosystem partners. I've learned from other industries. The beverage industry partnered to create recycled aluminum within the UK. The fashion industry partnered to create recycled cotton. There are really some incredible examples around the industry of how ecosystems have partnered, and I'm taking a lot of inspiration on that myself.
Super. Now, second big topic, and that I wanted to specifically discuss: how do you use AI? And knowing very well that Microsoft is I dare say, one, if not the most advanced companies leading AI efforts in the world. How are you using AI practically in your supply chain? Because I
Mhm.
think it has also reached an element right now where it's overused, perhaps grossly overused, and most people, call an automated Excel or a macro AI.
Yeah.
Maybe talk us through some of the things that you're doing at Microsoft in supply chain around AI.
Yes, I think, well, first, where we focused is on our customer experience around order management. So we've gone deep in that, making sure that we can take advantage of AI to help us improve that communication, get questions answered, and do it more proactively. So we've leaned in very heavy there. We've also leaned in to other functions, sourcing, and we've been using AI through machine learning and predictive analytics, but now we're using Copilot, which is of course the commercial product that we're selling, and we're marrying that with supply chain data and information. So those are some of the areas that we're leaning into. Like for sourcing, we're applying it to contract management. So our sourcing managers get the summary of the contract and they can go focus on negotiating the right points. And all that work is being done by AI. But the approach we're taking is more of a persona approach. So we're addressing an AI co-pilot or assistant based on the persona that you have. And then we're developing that co-pilot and we're making sure that we have the right data that will assist ultimately that work. So that's the approach that we're taking. And the results are good so far. Like, I think every single company I know is investing in AI. And the one question I always ask them is, what's your internal rate of return? Like, how are you measuring success? Because I like to just understand, what people are using for their measure of success. And it's really interesting because I get a lot of different answers. And I find myself in the same boat. In some cases, you can have a very finite financial measure. And like for us on order management, it's ticket reduction. So we can see exactly, hey, we're, by having the AI assistant, we can see that productivity and we can measure it. But in other cases, it's just more of a, employee efficiency or an operational efficiency, and it's a little bit hard to quantify. And so I think you're going to have a lot of different types of success measures when it comes down to AI. But the thing how we have orchestrated AI is we have basically an AI digital council, and it's representative of the functions. So each functions have a person, and it's really part of, and I want it to be part of the job. Like part of your job is to figure out how you're going to use AI to be more productive, to make the jobs more fulfilling, right? To remove transactional work. And hopefully, of course, we'd like it to reduce costs because we're supply chain. This is what we do. We take costs out. Productivity and operational efficiency are, core to the value proposition that we bring. And so that's in our DNA. That's how we think. And so for me, it's really encouraging. This is going to be more of a bottoms up pull than a tops down push, because I think it's really important that every single function, every single part of work, people are thinking about, okay, how can I use this? And then we leverage that and we can scale that. But that's the approach that we're taking.
And it almost sounds like it's more on culture than it is on the
Oh,
tool or tech. Yeah, or I mean, it's both ultimately, but it's that cultural element of how do you keep people open? How do you get them to just, named it well, Copilot, right?
yeah.
Copilot. And how do you
Hmm.
get them to just get used to and embed in their day to day, right? And then things will, over time, efficiencies will come, new ideas will come, new ways of doing things better will come. I think that a lot of times we as humans, we shine at the new shiny tech. Blockchain was something, that was going to completely change everything a few years ago, and it didn't really. I mean, apart from cryptocurrencies, I mean, in supply chain, there's some very limited applications that are happening. I also hear now today people talk all about AI. I think that pragmatism and practical element, yeah, but what's the next thing that you'll start going to seeing results in the next 6 months rather than in 5 years you're going to have I forget now the term that the supply chain all runs by itself on AI. I don't know. Is it are we gonna be there in 5 years or not? Maybe one day, but ultimately that's not what's gonna take you the results in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Like this, there's a huge culture change, and part of it is we're investing in training. I think everybody needs to be trained on AI and what that means for them. I think about like moving to Google Maps, for example. we all had, and by the way, I still have an Atlas in my car because my husband will not have a car without one in it. But we used to use maps to get around, and now we use Google Maps. It's our assistant, right? We still have to drive, we still have to get there, but now it's just much more efficient. And that's kind of how I think about AI. And so it's, to me, it is a culture change, but it's also preparing your organization for what AI is and what it isn't, and making sure they feel comfortable putting the time in to think about, how they're going to use this, and then how do we create that operating leverage across different solutions. Some of these things, are going to scale, and some of these are just going to stay as, hey, this is how I do this work, and it works for me. We have 3 North Stars that we put for the organization to ground everybody on how we want to use AI. The first one is to reduce inventory, so support sales growth, but with less inventory. The second is improve our customers' experience. And the third one is to improve operational efficiencies and, employee productivity. Like, we want our people to feel productive. And if there's a part of their job that, they don't like, or it doesn't make them, productive, it's a time sink kind of a thing. These are the opportunities that we want to come through the digital council. But we want it to be fast. Like, we want it to be kind of this culture of fail fast, learn, embrace, and go for it. Like, this is not going to be this huge digital strategy that somebody in a back room says, hey, we've coded all this, and now you can use it. It's not going to be that way. It's going to be much more here, we're going to give you some training on it. Tell us if we don't have the right data for you to get the outcome that you're looking for. That's where we have to work very closely with our data scientists. But outside of that, it's like, go figure it out and make it happen. And then we train the AI, and we get it to the scale that we want. And that's been a good approach for us so far.
Love it. Test and learn, do it again, and
That's
see what you can get from the experience. Now, on the topic of, and perhaps some examples from you, on the topic of culture, teams, structuring teams, change has never been faster. The pace of change has never been faster than what we are experiencing today. And you also spoke about, encouraging people, letting them try, and that cultural aspect. That these two things, culture and org structure, are very, sometimes the org structure is a bit more tangible, culture can be intangible, but I was just wondering if you have some examples of things that have worked for you, and maybe you've tried, and it usually is not rocket science, and it's usually small things, but that make a lot of difference in terms of just getting organization and your organization prepared for this fast pace of change.
It's such a great question. I do a few things. The first is I have a global leadership summit every year for my top leaders, my senior leaders. And we spend a day on strategy, a day on priorities, and a day on leadership. And this past year, we spent a whole half a day on AI. And it was probably one of the most engaging sessions we had. It was incredible. And I think, what we talked about on the third day on the leadership was leading through change. And part of what I really want my team to focus on is taking the time for themselves as leaders to get convicted on the change. For us to make sure that we're having open dialogue on why, and what, like, we recently went through an org change. Why did we go through an org change? We spent a lot of time on that. We had over 100 people impacted. Either they changed jobs or they changed managers, etc. So it was a pretty significant impact. And by the way, we talked to every single person who was impacted one-on-one. And so I'm a big believer in if you want to change an organization, you need to create the time and space for people themselves to get convicted in the change.
Mm.
And once they're convicted in the change, then they can lead others. But it's really important that leaders recognize and take the time to get their most senior leaders the space to understand why, to go through the debates, to ask the questions, and to ultimately get convicted so that they can bring others along and they feel grounded in what this change is. And quite frankly, Satya has pivoted the entire company to AI, and we did that over the last year. It was a pretty significant change. Every single business group went through a strategy refresh, every single business group across Microsoft. So it was pretty significant. But I've never seen the company more grounded and together because I think people had time to process and get convicted on this change. And as we said, AI is still early. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of use cases and to prove out the technology. And we're part of that. We eat what we sell. Like we also are on that journey to think through, okay, how are we going to use this, and how will this make the lives of our employees better, the experience for our customers better, and of course deliver value to the enterprise. And so those are the three things that we stay focused on. And maybe we should come back in a year and I'll let you know how all that's going.
Love it. Final question, Donna. In terms of the younger generation and some pieces of advice for the young professionals stepping into the workforce, what was most helpful for you if you were to share some principles of success to become a very senior and seasoned executive one day?
Yeah, this was also a great question. I have a few things that I've shared throughout my career, and I think the first one is just leave every job better than you found it. I mean, some of these are just really simple, but gosh, they're so important. Each job gives you an opportunity to learn and to grow. And if you leave a job better than you found it, then you're doing that. Um, the second part of advice would be, if you don't know it, learn it. Lean into experiences with energy, and then you learn as you go. I have too many people kind of holding themselves back. You have to be willing to fail, and but you also have to be willing to just be open to new experiences and learn. And just, if you bring that energy, I think that's what makes the difference. The third one is really an important one, especially earlier in your career, is recognizing leadership moments. And this, when I say that, it means step up when it counts, but be prepared. Be prepared for those moments. And those moments find you. Like, I remember September 11th was a leadership moment for me. My boss was at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with no cell service. He had no idea 9/11 happened. He had left me in charge. And I found myself on a phone call with a general because, of course, this was back in the Motorola days, and we had to get them phones. Of course, there was, no planes. Everything was grounded. It was one of those moments, and then I had to bring others together around, this crisis management situation. And you have to show up. You have to be willing to be that person. And I think that's really important, to recognize those moments and then to be prepared for them. The fourth one we just talked about, like, don't underestimate culture. A lot of people want to move jobs or move companies, and culture is a big part of your experience. And so I think understanding culture and where you can thrive, I think, is really important, especially early in your career. And then I think the last one, it's not work if you love what you're doing. So try to find something that you're passionate about. Try to find something that all of a sudden the time goes by and you're like, wow, it's 6 o'clock already. Gosh, I better get out of here. Like I find myself doing that even now because I love what I do. And so I think that shows through. Like when you really enjoy what you do, of course it's a job, there's aspects of it you don't like, but boy, it makes a big difference when you really enjoy what you do. And I know you do as well, because you can just tell when people have that energy when they love what they do.
Love it. No, those are five timeless principles. Thanks for sharing, Donna. And overall, really appreciate the time. Many great stories and examples shared today. Keep rocking. Good luck with the new devices launch with the with Microsoft, and keep making a dent. And I'll take you on it. So we talk again in 1 year and we see what progress was made.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me, Radu.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.